All right, so today we are diving into a film that I'm sure you've at least heard of.
Oh, yeah.
Fight Club.
Definitely.
It's become a bit of a cultural phenomenon.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you've heard all the things,
Right, sure.
like first rule of Fight Club and how cool Tyler Durden is.
Yeah.
But we're going way deeper than that today.
I think what's so fascinating about this film is how it works on all these different levels, you know?
Right.
On the surface, you've got this gritty, visceral thrill ride with like a really shocking twist.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But underneath that, it's really grappling with these complex ideas about masculinity and consumerism and identity that I think are even more relevant now than they were back in '99 when it came out.
It's so true. And that's what makes it, I think, perfect for a deep dive. Because like you said, everyone remembers the fights. Everyone remembers the iconic lines.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like this whole other layer that I think gets missed.
Sure.
It's like the film itself is kind of like an unreliable narrator.
Totally.
You know? It kind of lulls you in with this cool style. And then, bam, that twist.
Exactly. And that twist, the Tyler Durden reveal, it reframes the entire movie.
Completely, yeah. And for those who haven't seen it, it's basically about this nameless narrator.
Yeah.
Played brilliantly by Edward Norton.
Amazing performance.
So good. And he is just completely lost in this corporate machinery of the late 90s.
Yeah.
And he's just trying to buy happiness, self-worth, whatever it is, with IKEA catalogs.
Yeah, and it's failing him miserably. You know, his insomnia that he talks about throughout the film, it's not just about needing sleep. The source material makes it very clear that he can't find fulfillment in any of the things he surrounds himself with.
It's like he's spiritually exhausted.
Totally. Yeah.
I never thought about it like that. But that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
He's not just some guy who's like, oh, I need to get some sleep. It's this deeper.
It's much deeper than that.
Dissatisfaction with everything.
Exactly. And that's where the commentary on masculinity starts to come in, because he represents a very specific type of man that I think a lot of men can relate to, feeling lost in a society. That tells you to find your worth in your job and your possessions, and he has all that, but he still feels empty.
He's primed for someone like Tyler Durden to come in.
Yeah.
And just blow it all up.
Totally, and he's so compelling.
Brad Pitt.
So good.
So good. Every line's like a grenade.
The things you own end up owning you. That's the one that always gets me. It's like it just perfectly sums up his whole philosophy, this rejection of consumerism.
Right.
Don't let your possessions define you.
Yeah.
But it's also where things get a little tricky, because as seductive as that is, Tyler's brand of rebellion is dangerous.
Oh, for sure.
He's not just advocating for a simple life, it's like full-blown nihilism.
Yes. And that's what I think is so brilliant about the film. It makes you confront that kind of thinking.
Right.
Like, yeah, let's blow it all up. Let's start over. But then you see the consequences.
Which are?
And spoiler alert, not great.
Not great. No. And you see it with Tyler and the narrator, of course, but you also see it in how the other men in the film gravitate towards Fight Club.
Yeah.
It starts as this underground, like primal outlet for their frustrations. But as Tyler's influence grows, it becomes something far more sinister.
And I think that's such a good way to show how those feelings of disillusionment and anger can be manipulated.
Absolutely.
Especially like you were saying.
Yeah.
With men who don't think they have any other outlet.
Totally. And this is where I think the film goes beyond just a critique of consumerism or toxic masculinity. It's also holding up a mirror to how susceptible we all are to these charismatic figures who promise us easy answers, even when those answers are rooted in chaos.
It's like we want that disruption. We almost crave it.
We do.
And of course, we can't talk about Fight Club without talking about Marla Singer.
Right.
And I don't want to just relegate her to the love interest.
No.
Because Helena Bonham Carter.
Incredible.
Oh, she's so good. She brings such a depth to this character.
Yeah, she does.
I mean, she's messy. She's cynical. But she's also so perceptive.
Yes. Marla is so interesting because she's such a chaotic force.
Right.
Neither Tyler nor the narrator can really control her.
It's true.
So like when she shows up at that first support group, she sees right through them.
Yeah.
Especially the narrator.
Oh, totally. And she just throws him off.
Yeah.
Completely off balance.
Right.
He even says, he's like, everything's been the same since the day I met her.
Wow.
You know, it's like she disrupts this very careful world he's built for himself.
Yeah.
And he has to confront his issues.
And she does the same thing to Tyler. In a different way, of course.
Right.
Where Tyler is about control and manipulation.
Right.
Marla is unpredictable. She just refuses to play his game.
And what I think is so interesting is that Marla's not trying to save anyone. She's not like this manic pixie dream girl.
Right.
Showing the narrator like, oh, this is the error of your ways. You know, she's just surviving. In this world, that is just insane.
Yeah.
Especially like before Project Mayhem.
Exactly.
You know, when it gets really crazy.
She's just trying to exist.
Yes.
And that makes her such an interesting counterpoint to both the narrator and Tyler.
Totally.
Because they're searching for meaning.
Yeah.
Even if it's through destruction with Tyler, Marla just seems to embrace the absurdity of the whole thing.
Yeah.
She's not looking for answers. She's just living.
And in a way,
Yeah.
that makes her the most authentic character in the entire film.
I think so.
Because she's not putting on an act.
Right.
She is not trying to be anything other than who she is.
Totally.
And it's kind of refreshing,
It is.
but also kind of heartbreaking
It's true.
at the same time.
Yeah. And it's that authenticity, I think,
Yeah.
that lets her connect with the narrator on a deeper level than Tyler ever could.
I think so too.
Because I think ultimately that's what he wants.
Yeah.
That real connection.
He just goes about it in all the wrong ways.
the wrong way.
And speaking of the wrong ways, let's talk about Fight Club itself.
Okay.
It starts as this. Almost therapeutic release
Right.
for these men, like a way to tap into
Yeah.
this primal sense of masculinity
Yeah.
that they don't have in their corporate consumerist lives.
Right. It's like they're lacking that, and
Yeah.
Fight Club gives it to them.
But it becomes something much darker
Yeah.
and more destructive.
Yeah. And that's the danger of Tyler's philosophy. It's seductive
Yeah.
because it does speak to this very real frustration and powerlessness that I think a lot of men feel.
Totally.
But it's ultimately a very limited view of masculinity.
Totally.
It's all about destruction, tearing down the system, but it doesn't offer a real alternative.
It doesn't.
And I think the film does a good job of showing what those consequences look like
Oh, it does. Yeah.
for the characters,
Mhm.
but also for society as a whole.
Absolutely.
And you see that escalation from Fight Club to Project Mayhem.
Yes.
What starts as these small acts of rebellion turns into something much more dangerous,
And chaotic.
much more chaotic. And it's interesting how the film uses symbolism to kind of underscore that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, for example, the soap
Oh,
on
yeah.
the surface. It's just soap.
Right.
But it represents so much more.
It's the perfect example
Mm.
of how Fight Club takes something mundane and gives it this whole other meaning.
Right.
The soap being made of human fat,
Oh, yeah.
it represents this grotesque duality.
It does.
It's supposed to be cleansing,
Yeah.
purifying,
Yeah.
but it's made from the literal byproducts
Yeah.
of this consumerist system that Tyler hates so much.
It's like he's taking the ugliness of that system and
Yeah.
turning it into something useful,
Yeah.
but also repulsive,
Totally.
which is kind of brilliant.
It's such a great example of what makes the symbolism in Fight Club so effective.
Yeah.
It's not just about like, oh, this thing means this one thing. It's how all these symbols work together
Yeah.
to show how complex and contradictory
Yeah.
the themes of the film really are.
Exactly. It's almost like, you know, when you see something
Yeah.
for the first time, but it's always been there.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's
Wow.
not just soap.
Right.
It's this whole statement.
On consumerism and rebellion.
Exact.
And this movie is full of those moments.
Yes.
That's why it's so fun to rewatch.
And it really rewards multiple viewings because you pick up on all this new stuff.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I think that speaks to its legacy,
Oh, for sure.
even if it's a bit complicated.
What do you mean?
Well, you know the whole first rule of Fight Club thing?
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting, right? It's become this iconic line. Everyone quotes it.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder how much of the deeper message gets lost in translation.
That's a good point. Because on the surface, it can seem like, oh, it's just this glorification of violence.
Totally.
This nihilistic rejection of everything.
Yeah, and I think the film definitely has those elements.
Yeah.
But they're presented in a very specific context that I
Yeah.
think a lot of people...
It's like people see Tyler Durden as like this hero,
Yeah.
this aspirational figure
Right,
of
yeah.
rebellion. But they kind of forget about the consequences of his actions.
And the fact that he's a bad guy.
yeah.
He's not someone to emulate.
Yeah. Which I think speaks to how effective the movie is
Definitely.
in terms of like getting under your skin
Yeah.
and making you question your relationship to those feelings of discontent.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think for all its darkness
Yeah.
and violence, it's a hopeful film.
Real.
Because it recognizes that those feelings of alienation and anger, they're valid.
They come from somewhere.
Exactly.
It's not about saying those feelings are okay, it's about understanding them,
Exactly.
which is a really important distinction.
Because if we understand them, then maybe we can find better ways of dealing with them.
Right. Instead of blowing up credit card companies.
Exactly.
So I think as you go forth from this deep dive, with all these new insights, the question is, what is your fight club?
Ooh.
And not literally, but what is that cause, that idea
Yeah.
that you are willing to fight for?
Wow.
What's going to get you out of that IKEA catalog
Right.
and into a life that feels real
Mm.
and authentic
Mm.
and meaningful to you?
That's such a good question.
It's a question worth pondering.
It is.
And I think you might be surprised by the answer.
For sure.
That's the beauty of a good deep dive, right?
It is.
It's not just about what we talked about. It's
Yeah.
how that knowledge changes you.
Right.
Like how it changes the way you see
Yeah.
the film
Mm-hmm.
or the world, maybe even yourself.
Absolutely.
So keep those mental gears turning. And remember, sometimes the most insightful journeys start with a punch to the gut.
Ooh. I like that.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive on Fight Club. Until next time.